You're listening to Two Mics and a Guest, a podcast of people's stories and the career pathway that led them to where they are. And now your hosts, Michael Holliday and Mike Young.
Welcome, everybody, to this episode of Two Mics and a Guest. I am Michael Holliday. Joined with me, as always, can't talk today, is Mr. Mike Young.
Spit it out, dude. Mike Young. Good to be here.
Struggling. Mike.
I'm excited about this episode.
So excited. This person is very close to both of us. And, tell us who we have.
It took Tullahoma going to a state championship to get him back in the state at this time of year because Nick LaToof is a good dude. He lived here for a while, has strong connections with several folks in this area, particularly the Olives. We've already talked to Miranda on our podcast before. Nick has done so much stuff. It's hard to sum it up. I mean, he's played college football. He's been in the fitness and nutrition industry. Now he's sort of an adventurer. He said, "You're a dirtbag," and he said he took that well. He is doing a lot of
self-proclaimed dirtbag. We didn't call him that.
I did not do it, and I don't even know what that means, but we may talk about that in a minute. Right now, he's about to head into snowboarding season and head out to the mountains, I'm sure.
Yeah, that's right. Had a really good summer of fishing. I do some fish guiding, or fly fish guiding, I guess you could say, in the summertime. But the fishing's turned down a little bit, and we're starting to get into winter. Some snow's falling out west. Typically stay in Colorado, but
so Colorado you would consider as your general home base?
I call it base camp. Yeah, I call it base camp because that's kind of where I work out of. That's kind of where I store gear, like for the off seasons. Right. That's pretty much where I'll have all my fishing gear when I'm not fishing. All my snowboarding gear is there now. And I was supposed to be back this week, but like you said, Wildcats are in the state championship. I wouldn't miss that for the world. Had to push some things back on my schedule for when I get back, but it was totally worth it. I wouldn't miss this.
So if you're not aware, I am the kicking coach for Tullahoma High School, and Nick actually kicked footballs in college, high school and college. So majority of last year during COVID, Nick was actually with us and helping me out quite a bit at practice and was around the team and really knows a lot of the guys that we have going to this state championship game. So we're so glad that you're able to come back and be with our guys and be with us as we take this journey.
Yeah, I'm stoked to be back. I was watching or listening to the game last week at home in Texas, and I was really pulling for you guys because I knew that I'd be able to make it this week. Schedule got real busy on me this fall. I wasn't able to make it down. Right. But I'm really glad you guys thought about me and went ahead and went all the way this year so I could make it to a game.
And no one deserves it more than our head coach, John Olive.
I couldn't agree more. I've been, like you said, I played college football and high school football and stuff, and been around a lot of coaching staffs, and you can't say enough good words about the Olives and what they do and what they've done in this program. In a couple of years, they went through some really tough years, and to have them bounce back like this and have an opportunity to bring a state championship home to Tullahoma is, all you can really ask for.
Not only are they so smart at the X's and O's of football, but they are just the nicest, best humans. They're just so giving, and a lot of our players take away more of how to be a young man than anything X's and O's that's taught in football. So
100%. I mean, I wouldn't be sitting in this chair right now if it wasn't for the Olives. I mean, the way they took me in, treated me like family. I love coming back to Tullahoma for them, and all the people I've met here. It's just a really good place. I think this is probably one of the most underrated places I've ever been to, and I've been, all over North America. So, but it feels like coming home when I come to Tullahoma. So I like being here.
We appreciate it. We love having you here.
Tullahoma Chamber will pay him for that later.
Yeah.
So
that sounds like an
ad. A lot of reasons to love the Olives. One of the reasons I do love them is I got to meet Nick because of them. That was one of the ways he was living here for a while. And I hate to admit, because people can actually see me on here, he helped train me for a little bit when I was in actual better shape than I'm in now. And obviously, I've not been relentless about it. And I need to get back on the wagon. I miss having him here. He was good help. Look, let's get to it, man. You're about to go back into the snowboarding. You just talked about being working as a fisherman guide, that kind of thing. What's a day in the life of that look like?
That's a good question. Obviously, a day in the life for me is very seasonal. It depends on what's going on. Is it winter? Is it summer? what the weather's like, because a lot of things are condition dependent.
Right.
You know, what rivers we're fishing, how we're fishing it. It depends on, you know, weather, temperatures, storms coming in, things like that. And wintertime is even more so dependent on the weather.
And you're not going to Whistler and do. I mean, you're doing backcountry stuff. Is a lot of what you're doing.
Mostly backcountry stuff. Yeah, I did 90 days in the backcountry last winter. Anywhere from went up to Alaska, lots in Colorado, in Wyoming. I don't think I got out to Utah this year, but it depends on where the good conditions are. And basically, I like to think of the snowboard season, winter season, as a football season, right? So right now we're kind of preseason. We're gearing up. It's 2-a-days, so I'm prepping my body and, you know, trying to get an idea of planning where I'm going to go, what I'm going to do, and that sort of thing. So preseason now. During the season is kind of your midwinter months, right? In Colorado, we have a really bad snowpack there as far as avalanche conditions are concerned. So it's really hard to get in the big mountains on serious terrain in those conditions. So I find a lot of time I'm in, you know, pretty low angle terrain, not the gnarly stuff you see on the movies and stuff, and even some stuff I've posted. You know, that's not an everyday thing. That is very condition dependent, and you really have to have your ducks in a row for those sort of things. So you have that chunk of the season that's, you know, your season, right? You got to prepare to get and maybe make a deep playoff run.
Yeah.
So for me, that's just getting out, getting the legs underneath me, analyzing snow conditions, seeing where snow is as far as across the country. I like to schedule my travels around good snow, where stable snow is. And things like that, so for safety reasons, but also gearing towards the, you know, state championship, if you will, the bigger kind of objectives that I have on the radar for later in the spring. It's funny too because it's a winter sport, right? But the big things really don't go down until spring, until mid-March is kind of when it starts cranking up, and you start kind of, you know, not taking risks out there. I don't want people to think that it's all about risk. It's actually about risk mitigation. Yeah. But
I was thinking about even as you talking about snow conditions and analyzing that. I mean, that's not something. Where do you learn that?
I remember last year when you were here with us for a while, I asked you about avalanche training, and you said there's actual training courses that you do for avalanche preparedness.
Sure. Yeah, and I've taken at least one course every year for the last 3 or 4 years now, and I got another one lined up in January. That's kind of what training for in December is geared towards that. So they have recreational courses there that teach just average people who want to go out and maybe don't want to do anything crazy, but just I think anybody who lives in avalanche terrain should have some kind of education on that, because there's been people die in roof avalanches, like snow falling off roofs. So just being aware, like if you're in the mountains, you should have some kind of awareness on what can cause an avalanche and how to stay safe and avoid them. So there's recreational courses, and then there's pro level courses for your guides and people who work in snow industries and stuff like that. And I'll actually be taking my first pro course in January. So, and that's kind of building towards becoming a certified mountain guide. So ideally what I'd like to do is be able to take people out skiing and snowboarding or splitboarding into the backcountry safely and have them, you know, enjoy the mountains that I enjoy them and in the way I enjoy them, right? You can go to a resort, and that's super fun. I've done that a lot. But there's nothing more rewarding than being able to self-propel yourself to the top of the mountain, and it's just a slower, more enjoyable process, and then it's more rewarding when you're on your way down, and, you know, you've had a 6 or 8 hour hike up.
Yeah, you're not helicoptering in.
No.
You're walking up these.
No, I don't make enough money to helicopter.
It'd be nice if you could.
It would be nice, and there's trips out there that do that. I'm not knocking those. I would definitely take advantage of one of those trips if somebody were to sponsor me for that. But for me, it's all about kind of, you know, growing up playing sports, right? You work to achieve something, and it's all about the process of that. And the process of that goes long before I show up at the trailhead and then start climbing. It's, you know, weather conditions and snow conditions and just seeing what Mother Nature has given me, because you're very much at the mercy of Mother Nature out there. These are real mountains, big mountains. They take lives every single year, and they take lives of people who know what they're doing, that have a lot of training. So
and there's wild animals out here also.
For sure. Yeah, I had a moose encounter last spring. It wasn't anything crazy, but it was the longest day that we had out there. I was out with a buddy. It was in the Grand Teton National Park, and we were doing this obscure line that not too many people know about. There's not even really much information online about it. So I'm not going to give it away here. Sorry, but DM me.
Can't give away your honey hole.
No, definitely not. But even if I did give it away, there's some serious commitment there.
Sure.
One of the photos I have on Instagram that kind of went crazy was on that peak. I'm climbing a ridge, and it's a pretty gnarly little ridge, and it would have been really more gnarly, I guess you could say, if it wasn't. We weren't socked in with clouds, because I'm on kind of this knife ridge, and it's basically hundreds of feet on either side, and you don't want to fall. I wasn't too worried about it. I've been in spicier places before, but for the lay person, it was pretty.
It's a good
intense,
shot
for sure.
Yeah.
I liked it, and it's a great memory from that day. And that whole day we did a lot of things right. We had a couple things go wrong, and we made it out. Nothing was ever life threatening, but just the icing on the cake was we're like, I don't know, maybe a quarter mile from the trailhead where we parked, and we start seeing these moose tracks, and it's dark. We start in the dark and we finish in the dark, which wasn't a plan that we wanted to do. We kind of bit off a little bit more than we can chew and kind of got our timing off a little bit. But, we were fine. We knew how to get out. We had everything that we needed navigation-wise still working. We didn't lose batteries or anything like that. It was just kind of bad timing. So we're getting close to the car, and we start seeing these moose tracks. And we're like, that's just what we need, a moose encounter. And we're tired. It's been a 14-hour day at this point. So, luckily we just kind of, it was a moose that's in that area a lot. And it was a mom with her calf, and they tuck underneath in the trees. So we just, it made our trip back to the car just a little bit longer, and kept us honest too. Because if we'd have just, kind of put your head down and get back to the car, and it could have been different. But
again, a part of that, when you talk about preparation, obviously there's physical preparation for this, but the preparation you've done, knowing how to handle a moose encounter, knowing how, and you can have the basics. It's still different when you're doing it, right? But you had to have some information there before. All of that's part of this prep thing that you're talking about pre-season.
For sure. Yeah,
right?
For sure. Knowing the mountains, knowing the terrain. Like, you plan your route up the peak before you ever get there. If you're trying to figure it out from there, you're either doing something nobody's ever done before or trying to set a new route. And I'm not that good. I don't do that. So I really try to make sure I have everything that I need to know before I ever even think about yes or no. Before I make a decision, yes or no, I have as much information as I can get, and I'm like, okay, I think it's safe. We can go do this.
Well, your Instagram's a great follow, because there's so many cool places I've seen you go, and I'm not going any of them. Yeah. I mean, what I'm saying, I'm not going to be there.
Sure.
But being able to do that and share it is great.
We were talking a little earlier before you got here about Alex Honnold and the movie Free Solo, the documentary Free Solo.
Oh, yeah, I've seen it, for sure.
And you see how much prep work, like you were talking about. I know there are different things of climbing, that versus, climbing in snow and snowboarding down and stuff like that.
Sure.
But the prep style has got to be very similar. And that documentary gave lay people an insight to what it takes to really hone in that craft and be safe about it, as safe as possible, and how to get better at it, and how to can kind of consume you, but also
for sure.
The love, passion, and everything that you have, and the hard work that it goes into it.
And I think what I like about that movie and other movies out there that have done similar stuff is a lot of people who don't really understand it may think we're just adrenaline junkies and just doing this because we have this desire to push ourselves to the limit. And it's not that at all. Most people, if not all people, kind of doing the same things that I do, would say that they're not really in it for the adrenaline. If our adrenaline's up, something's probably gone wrong. And
you're not as safe, right?
Yeah, I mean, you kind of need to be calm, cool, and collected pretty much at all times when you're in the mountains. There's really no benefit to getting excited or, have that adrenaline start pumping. So, for us, I think it's just the process of it, like you said, and then the challenge. I think as humans, we have this desire to adapt and grow. I mean, we've been doing it since the beginning of time in a lot of different fields. And, conquering mountains is really old. It goes back a long time. So there's just, the metaphors of the mountains, obviously, but, being in the mountains and stuff, a lot of that stuff's really come to life for me. And the philosophies that I kind of studied before I really got into the mountain stuff, it kind of makes it more concrete in my mind. And how I've lived my life is just, being in the mountains, being in these hostile environments, and being able to maybe not thrive, but have a good time out there and enjoy, God's creation, because there's so much stuff out there.
I'm so jealous of the sunrises and sunsets you get to see.
Yeah.
Like, you share a little bit on your Instagram, but I can only imagine just the meditation and just taking everything in and just those moments.
Oh, for sure.
I do appreciate you bringing up the adrenaline junkie stereotype. I mean, the soundtrack's added after it's all been done, right?
Yeah.
And it's cool.
There's no soundtrack going on when you're up there, unfortunately. It would be a lot cooler. But.
Well, but we all love those videos. I mean, from the surfer videos to the mountain video, all of that's cool, and the soundtracks are usually really good. Mm-hmm. But there's a different mindset that you're looking at when you're in those situations.
Oh yeah, I mean, it's as simple as take it one step at a time, one day at a time. That old adage, but it's true up there.
Mm-hmm.
There's days up there where you're not quite confident in the conditions, and you kind of go, well, let's go check it out, and you go check it out, and you literally. Or you get to, you have checkpoints where you're like, all right, cool, let's see what we see here and make a decision from there. And there was a day out there, just me and another buddy went out and couldn't find too much information on the specifics of what conditions were at that particular time. But we had an idea of stuff around it. So I was like, well, let's just go check it out. We can stay safe and check it out and just make moves as we go. And that's what we did. We had a couple checkpoints. We got to them. We're like, I feel good about it. Let's go get closer. Let's keep moving. And we just gradually made our way up the mountain. And then we, had different checkpoints and stuff. And literally each step we took, we were analyzing snow and just making sure that, hey, this seems good. Conditions are okay. It was really windy that day. So we decided not to go all the way to the top. We stopped. It was like a 14,000-foot peak. We stopped at like 13,500. And we were like, we probably don't want to mess with that ridge today because it was gusty. It was like 70, 80 mile an hour gusts with sustained 25 to 30 probably. So, yeah, really not a great day to be in the mountains, to be honest with you. If it's that windy, something like that can shut you down pretty quickly. But we decided to go for it. And literally we were standing on the valley floor. It was a hiking on the valley or through the valley to get to the peak we were doing. And we were standing there looking up and taking some pictures and talking. And Gus came through the valley and literally like blew us back on our skis. Just like we weren't, it was, so he was like, okay, that's a noted point there. We need to, so it was some serious wind. But fortunately, we were on like a northeast aspect and we were mostly sheltered from the wind while we were on the face. So it kind of worked out for us. But, that's kind of the give and take you have there. There's been days where I've gone up, for I don't know, a mile in and just like, I don't feel good about this and turn around, and then there's days like that where we're like, I don't know if we feel good. We keep going. We almost complete the objective and we come back. So there's that give and take and there's a lot of analysis like on the way. Like you made a reference the other day about building the plane while you're flying it. Yep. And a lot of that has to do with that. Obviously, you have your foundational stuff.
Right.
But
well, I want to talk about that a little bit. You've written a couple of books. One's called Relentless Mindset. You've co-authored a book with Chad McCrary called Answering the Call. And a lot of that's there, but I don't want to leave what you're talking about just yet. You talked about going up there and seeing conditions and all that. A lot of times we might hear relentless, like, ain't nothing going to stop me. I'm going to 20 mile an hour winds, 80 mile an hour winds. I'm going to go do it. That's relentless. The mindset that you're talking about is something different than that. It's being able to say no to the mountain at that point, right?
Yeah, for sure.
There's a big part of this that's not just
calculated risk.
Yeah. Right. There's times when we're stupid because we're playing some kind of tape in our head and we're doing something that we probably shouldn't. Being able to have the mindset where I can say yes and I can say no and be able to make a proper decision is a big deal. And that's part of this whole relentless thing you're talking about, though.
100%. Yeah, that's a great point because a lot of people think that relentless is just kind of just bashing your head against the wall until you get through it, and that's not it at all. I think most people who would say, or when you call somebody relentless, is like they're not going to let the things that shouldn't stop them.
Gotcha. Yep.
But they're not going to just blindly go into something that could be dangerous or it just doesn't make any sense. I'm not saying there's impossible things out there, or there used to be, that people thought were impossible and they've been done now, right? So the relentless people have, found a way and put away those doubts, right? Well, let me just go test those waters. Not necessarily believing that maybe it can't be done, but let's just go find out. And I think that's what you have to be relentless about. You have to have the mindset, like, to say that I think this could possibly be done. I think I could possibly do it. how do I need to prepare
Let's
myself?
work the problem.
It's a
to go do
scientific
it?
approach.
It is, yeah. And that's kind of how I live my life, the scientific method. You have a problem, have a hypothesis, and then you test it, right? And then you get results back from that test, and then you pivot and change your test, or you give up because it's not worth it, or there's different things.
Sure.
And a lot of my life has been the guess and check method. Like you said, I was in fitness. I was in fitness for almost 10 years. I grew up an athlete, so being in the weight room and workouts and stuff just was, a huge part of my life, obviously. And then I enjoyed teaching other people that through classes and working with younger athletes.
Guy. I don't know if he enjoyed fat old guys like me, but it was good for me anyway.
No, I enjoyed it. I mean, everybody. That's one of the cool things about it. Everybody comes to you wanting a different goal. Comes to you with a different body. It was a challenge to me to help people get to where they want to be with where they currently are, and that was a great life for me, and I enjoyed it very much. But a big question I've asked myself then and multiple times throughout my life that's kind of helped me change course a little bit was, all right, let me see how just absolutely the most successful I can be in this field. What does that look like? Just, planning for the best, right? A lot of people plan for the worst, but they don't necessarily plan for the best. Right. And I've always done both. I think it's important to do both because more than likely it's going to end up somewhere in the middle, right? You're not ever going to have worst case scenario typically, and you're never going to be absolute best case scenario. But if you're okay with both of those ends, the middle you'll be okay with and you'll figure it out. So the question I asked myself was like, all right, if I'm as successful as I ever wanted to be in this field, what does that look like? And, I kind of played that out in my head, and I was like, all right, is that what I want? And then,
that right there is a big question that sometimes often gets overlooked.
100%. I agree with you. And I've asked myself,
is it what I really want?
And it's tough too, because that's a question. I didn't ask myself that one day and answer it. It took maybe about 6-8 months before I was like, I don't think that, and there's the sunk cost fallacy, like, oh, I just wasted 8-10 years of my life doing all this stuff. And it's like, yeah, but no, you didn't.
No,
because you learned a lot. You got a lot of experience. And just because even if you did waste it, that's 8 years. You're going to waste the rest of your life just because you wasted 8 years?
The episode we filmed yesterday, we touched on that point as well, is that you might be in what you might at that time feel like is a meaningless job or just an ends to a mean or means to an end, but you're still going to pick up life advice and skill from that. And if you're flipping burgers, you're going to learn how to interact with the public. You're going to learn how to deal with customers, or
I think I think this is an interesting point that you're making. Both of y'all are making is, what'd you call the fallacy? I don't know if I've heard that actual term.
Sunk cost fallacy.
It would be like saying, man, that 14,000 feet up the mountain was a waste. I mean, I just want to go down the mountain. You got to get up there. You had to do it. It made you who you are. I flunked out of college my third semester. We've talked about that on here multiple times. There's some regrets about that because I think I wasted some opportunities I had at that point. However, that experience has made me who I am. It helped me move me forward. To be able to accept that, though, there's a certain, again, we get back to this mindset thing and being able to use these things to move you forward, to help you figure out what you want.
Yeah. Right? Well, and I think a lot of people have this idea, maybe, preconceived or just the way our culture is, but you can only be successful at one thing. Mm-hmm. It's like a lot of people's like, go all in on one thing and not a bunch. I've kind of always done the opposite. I've always been more of a jack of all trades, master of none kind of thing because, I think it's more useful just in a real world setting, but it gives you an opportunity to taste a lot of different things. And then kind of what I've done is tasted a bunch of things. And then I'm like, okay, cool. I have all these skills in these areas, but now I want to go all in on a couple things. Right. So that's what I've done. I tasted the mountaineering and the snowboarding side of things. Like, oh, I really like that. I'm going to go all in on that. And then the fishing thing, same thing. I'm going to go all in on that. And then I have, the training and stuff like that and the riding. All things I'm really good at. But just because you're good at something doesn't mean you have to do it for forever, know?
That goes back to the episode yesterday as well. I mean, similar topic. But so what, you talked about pivoting. I'll throw this out. In high school, some of our audience will be some students that are trying to figure it out. How do we get from here to there? And a lot of times they see that end destination. They see it as that's not attainable. But my problem with that whole mindset sometimes is it's someone trying to live someone else's story, right? And they see it laid out. How did you do that? And it sort of assumes, so I can do the same thing, right? Yeah. What did you want your life to be like when you were in high school? What were you thinking?
High school, I don't there's no telling what I was thinking in high school. But I'll tell you this, the number one best thing I ever did coming out of high school was go to college 12 hours away from where I grew up.
Yeah.
It forced,
why is that? Tell me.
It forced me to. I knew one other buddy. He was going to school. I actually talked to him, and he's my best buddy today. He lives with me in Colorado. But other than that, I didn't know anybody else. It forces you to get out and meet new people.
Yep.
It forces you to experience a different culture than what you're used to. Even though Northeast Texas to East Tennessee, not crazy different, but some differences, and you're meeting different people, and it forces you to get out of your comfort zone, right? You just stay in the place you grew up your entire life. You never get out. I'm not saying coming back. You can always come back, right? But you always come back differently once you get out, and I think there's some value in that. So that was probably maybe my best piece of advice is you don't have to go to school 12 hours away. You don't have to go to school at all. But I would recommend people get out and travel and see some different sides. Force yourselves out of that comfort zone and force yourself to talk to people you may not really want to talk to. But
perspective change,
I mean, I think that's been a huge part of me and kind of my mindset is having all those perspectives. I mean, I've lived in a lot of different places, seen a lot of different things, and it just gives you a better world view than if you just stayed in one spot and just talked to the same people over and over.
What did we major in college?
Exercise science.
Oh,
so I actually used my degree for a good while. So I was happy about that. I'm not using it that much anymore, but that doesn't mean it was wasted.
But it got you to where you are now.
It did, and it allowed me to play football at the collegiate level, and that helped develop the mindset, the relentlessness, the perseverance, and hard work. And nothing really good comes from not working. You got to work to achieve things, and it's pretty simple stuff, but. Not only just working, but working with that purpose.
Right.
Like you guys could, if you ran 1,000 sprints at football practice, be really good shape. Yeah. But that may not translate to the football field. Sure. May not get you to wins on Friday night. So work, but also working with that purpose. And kind of to go back on your question, for me, there was never like an end goal. I didn't really know what I wanted. I mean, there's a couple things I could have done. Obviously, it could have been strength and conditioning coach at a college. I definitely thought about that. I was kind of on that path, but that never really panned out. I never really pursued it because, I didn't think that I wanted that. So I think that's one thing that's kind of unique about me. I didn't really let anybody tell me what you should do, what you can do, this is what you should do, or any of that. I was just like, I'm just going to go figure it out. And that's kind of been my MO for a good while. I was like, I'll figure it out. This is where I'm at now. Do I want to be here next week? Yeah, I think I want to be here next week, but maybe not next year. Right. So maybe like start thinking about, all right, if I don't want to be here forever, what's the next move? And, I think it's good to look at it through like stepping stones. You don't necessarily look at that 100 stepping stone way down the way. You look at the next one so you don't step in the mud or whatever.
Probably not good to look at the 100 feet.
It's probably not. It's probably not. So it goes back to the step-by-step kind of thing. Just take it a day at a time. It's cliche, and it's not, the sexy advice everybody wants to hear. Yep. But that is what it is. You ask any successful person, they're going to tell you they just buckled down and started one day, and they're at ground zero. But now they're somewhere different, and you never get to that 1,000th day. You never get to the state championship if you don't play game one.
Correct. And kind of touching back to what Mike said a few minutes ago, is you see that end goal and you're like, you look at someone else's path to that end goal and you're like, I don't think that's me, but it's probably not you. But you can still have that same end goal.
For sure.
But you don't need to look at that end goal and be like, oh, I can't do that. Like, it's unattainable. Well, sure, because you've got to work your way up to it. Yeah. Like, it's going to take those stepping stones, like you just said, and your path is definitely going to look different than someone else's because you're different. So.
What, on those terms, again, I go back to Brock's conversation yesterday. He said something I thought was interesting. He was very good at math. And in this town, that narrative means you're going to be an engineer. And the culture around him was saying that. And he was excellent at it. But it was a point where he was like, but that's not what I want to do. And you've alluded to that. That's not what I want to be, what I want to do. And he was able to make that pivot and go down the path that he wanted to do. I mean, in athletics, playing college athletics, such a few small percentage of folks take those next steps, right? Of being, man, I get to play college football, those kind of things.
Well, and there's a mindset component of that too, because I played with several high school guys that could have gone and played ball and probably would have been better than me.
We talked about that last year,
and they just don't, right? They just don't have, and it's okay if they don't want
Pick
to.
the field that goes in any field, by the way.
Oh yeah, 100%. Yeah, 100%. I'm just using football because that's kind of my background, but. And that's perfectly okay if they don't want to. But I think more often than not, it's like they just don't think that they can because whatever, maybe a narrative they've heard when they were younger, or they just come from a spot. Like I come,
or maybe there's voices in their life telling them they can't.
Exactly.
Sometimes you see that with, peers or people that aren't in your life, but
and
are
possibly
negatively telling you, well, you're never going to make it. You're not going to do this. You're not this.
For sure. I think it's funny though. You guys call Tullahoma a small town. Because this town dwarfs my town.
Wow.
The town I grew up in Northeast Texas has one red light, and I graduated with like 70 kids in my senior class. We had at one point, I think as a sophomore, we had like 23 people on varsity football team. Wow. And we went 10-2.
There's 11 people on a field at a time. In case people who are not football people don't know. If there's only 11 on the field at a time and your whole team's 23, there's not a lot of depth.
We didn't have offense and defense. We had 12 players that played everything.
Yeah.
So like,
you had to, right?
My junior year, senior year, I came off the field for kickoff return. That is the only time I came off the field unless I had like made a long catch or something and needed a little break. But
you were out there on kickoff, I assume.
Oh, I was kicking off.
Yeah, you're the guy.
Yeah.
It's full 11v11 because they're doing 7v7. Some of these little
some
schools.
of them, yeah. We weren't that small, but we were pretty small. But football was a big part of that. But
football in the state of Texas, let's be honest,
it's big.
It's a religion, isn't it? I mean,
it pretty much is.
Yeah.
I mean, it was, Friday Night Lights. I didn't quite live that life because that was a much bigger high school. But
Billy Bob Thornton wasn't at your high school?
Unfortunately not. Booby Miles wasn't either. But we did have a running back that played for the Jets.
Wow.
And we've put some people in college and stuff. So that whole little area, that whole Northeast Texas little area it's small town type stuff, but we've put some people in the NFL and Major League Baseball. And so there's some athletes there. But I think that goes to the hard work, because we know we're from a small town. If we want to compete for a state championship, we're there in June and July and August every day working.
And that's what people don't see. And you're not going to have crowds cheering your name there in the hot June days.
You're not. You're not at all. Nobody's going to be there.
You were going to that, and part of it you're talking about now, that mindset of taking that next. Some people think I can't do it. Some people do. Is that a muscle we can develop? Is that something that we can there's a lot that goes into that. I mean, obviously the family you come from, the encouragement you get, the encouragement you don't get, I'm going to do it to show somebody, or I'm going to do it from the positive or the negative side, right? I mean, there's lots of ways to take
motivating
those steps.
factors.
Yeah. I think we just need to get out of our own way a lot of the times, right?
I agree with that.
So there's a point in time where you have to become responsible for your own life, right? You can blame your upbringing, however you came up. You can blame that up until a certain age, right? But there comes a point in everybody's life where you have to make a choice, and you have to make that choice for yourself, and then you are 100% responsible for the outcome of those choices.
Yep.
And I think, a lot of people realize that, but I think a lot of people are scared to look dumb or look stupid in front of people. And that's one thing about me. Like, I'll ask anybody any question if I really want to know, and I don't care if it makes me look stupid or anything, because that old adage, ask a man a question, you look dumb for a second. But if you don't ask them, you look dumb for a return.
Right, right.
So, I mean, I think, asking people questions. You want to get out and learn? You think you want to go do something? You want to go be a high school football coach? You want to go coach kickers? Hey, come up and ask Mike Holliday what it takes. What does this job look like? Maybe you would want to do that. Maybe after learning what that looks like, I want to change my mind.
That's how I learned. I asked other people.
I'm
still fairly new to this if we think about, the coaching spectrum. And I had a lot of mentors in my life that I would send video clips to, or I would ask questions.
Exactly.
I got lucky enough to make friends with a former NFL kicker, and
I know.
I shoot him videos all the time, or ask questions and be like, what do you see here? Because I see this. Do you see this also? And it's those peers in your life that can help you get to where you might want to be.
Yeah, that's awesome. Oh, and I'm glad you did that because then I got a chance to meet him last year.
That is true.
And that was.
But I also asked you questions at practice.
Yeah, for sure.
Like I mean, I knew your background, and I was like, you're a wealth of knowledge as well. So like, what are you seeing here too? So
yeah, and that's the thing. You asked the former NFL kicker questions, and then you asked me a D2 kicker questions. Right? We all have something to bring to the table.
Yes.
No matter your skill level.
And one is not more important than the other.
No, exactly not. I mean, because there's a lot of beginners that you can ask questions that kind of your old heads don't think about anymore because they've done it so much.
Yep.
So I've always loved asking beginners questions like, oh, how do you see this? What are you seeing here? Because it gives you a new mind's eye to viewing a problem. Because like you there's probably some blind spots that you have because you've been doing it however long you've been doing it. But you bring in somebody new, it's like, oh, I didn't even think about that.
Well, and I had a soccer background. I never kicked a football in high school. I was in the stands in the student section cheering on the team. I never played football in high school. Yeah. But I had a soccer background. I knew how to kick.
Sure.
Balls and objects like that. I knew how the mechanics worked because it's a very similar, cadence at times.
What's the weirdest object you ever kicked? I'm interested. You said balls and objects.
There's kickballs, there's soccer balls.
But what's an object you've kicked?
Hacky sacks. If we're going to really date ourselves, we'll talk about hacky sacks.
I've kicked hacky sacks a lot.
That's true. But yeah, I didn't know when I was starting out.
Well, that's the thing. You just got to ask, right? If you don't know, I mean, with the wealth of knowledge on the internet these days, sure, you can't trust all of it. I would recommend, going to somebody in person. Because I think we're losing a lot of the personal touch. I
agree with that.
I would have done this podcast with you guys in Colorado, but I would much rather be here, and I'm glad it's worked out that I was here for this thing because there's, this right here, flesh and blood, talking to flesh and blood. There's just something, primal about that, and I think that's important, and I think that gets lost. So if you have questions and you can see them in person, I would recommend maybe a phone call to give them an idea of like, hey, I want to ask you questions. Can I buy you a cup of coffee or whatever? Just, find a way to make it happen. And I've asked a ton of people, hey, let's meet up for coffee. I got some questions I want to ask you. And most of the time, they're more than willing to do it.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Obviously, if it's some celebrity that's probably not going to see your message, you got to be a little realistic. But, you never know until you take that chance.
Well, you've said, too, a couple of things here that at first glance, somebody might say, you said early on, I'm just going to do it. I'm going to do it. I'm going to figure it out. Mm-hmm. And it sounded very independent in some kind of way. So I'm not going to take that advice. It's the way somebody might hear that, except now you're talking about all these people you're asking questions to and being able to do that. And so it's one thing to have that inner motivation to figure it out on my own. And then the method you can use to figure it out is gaining all this stuff.
Exactly. You're 100% right. You're 100% right. And there's a chapter in my first book it's called Self-Made.
Shameless plug.
Yeah.
No, I was kidding.
No, go get it. Go
anybody wants it. It's like 5 years old now. I'll just send you a copy. But it's called Self-Made. And basically what I talk about is nobody's really self-made. Everybody's had help.
Right. Yep.
Everybody's had help.
That's right.
Whether it be mentors, be people financially backing
or
their
they
ideas.
read a book about a topic.
Exactly.
Watch a YouTube video,
Exactly. So, that whole thing, I think a lot of people want to proclaim that. It's kind of this high and mighty thing in our society, but it's really not a real thing. It's just kind of things we do for our ego.
Pull ourselves up by the bootstrap thing, and somebody's sitting there holding the bootstrap here, dude.
You go ask anybody that's really made it big, multimillionaires, all these billionaires or whatever who you want to ask.
Somebody supported them.
Exactly, and they'll be the first ones to tell you that, without them, I don't know if my idea would have got off the ground, know? So for them, it's... it's funny that you just brought that up because there's a lot of instances where I do pull at both sides. I pull from both sides. And
different scenarios, you need to attack differently.
I agree. And I think, context is incredibly important in everything. And you got to, halfway have an idea of what you want to get to, but by all no means does it have to be the thing that you have to do. Well, you never not change your mind.
I think it's important to talk about that because it's living in any town. I'm taking small town. I mean, we live where we live, and that culture and that society that we're living in. And it's an old metaphor. I got to use something other than changing the tape because nobody listens to tapes anymore. Nobody's pulling the cassette or the 8-track out. You got to change we play the same scripts all the time sometimes, and they're automatic, and a lot of times they're given to us by our peer groups or whatever. And I'm not just talking about peer pressure, and that's got to be cliche. If something happens and we respond to it, and a lot of times it's this rote routine script that we've been given or that we've developed or whatever it might be. You've had to change the script a few times, it sounds like, but I can see some common threads going through your story from each pivot that you've talked about. You didn't have a plan to do what you're doing now when you left high school. It didn't seem like.
No, not necessarily. No. I mean, I grew up in Northeast Texas. If everybody ever driven through there, there's not too many mountains.
Snowy mountains. No.
Not a lot of snow either. I mean, occasionally we do get a freak storm here and there, but you'd have to go to the overpass to find the largest hill. So it's getting out there and, like I said, trying a bunch of different things. And seeing where you go, and then not being afraid. Obviously, there was no mentors for mountaineering, and decaf that I knew of, or even in the nearby towns. So.
Did moving to East Tennessee help spark some of this kind of mountaineering interest, or? It'd
be hard to say definitively no, but back then it wasn't, an interest to me. Obviously, I loved being in the outdoors, in the mountains and being outdoors and things like that. But back then, outdoors for me was football practice.
Right.
Yeah, that's true.
Because that really consumed, like you said,
a lot of time.
Texas. It's a big deal. So we spent a lot of time football practice, and then college. Obviously, it's almost a job at that point.
Yep.
So football took over a huge part of my life. And then when that was over with, it was like, what the heck do I do now? Because it was such a big part for all my youth and growing up and into early adulthood. Right. And then I'm sitting at 23 years old, and now I got this huge hole to fill, right? Yep. So I think what happened to me is I kind of went through a bunch of different things. I did some bodybuilding, did some modeling. I did a couple of different things and was trying to fill that void. And I don't think I found anything that filled it until I found the mountains. Yep. And I think it was a lot of the process of getting into the mountains. There's a lot of things that go in the film room, right? That you're trying to prepare, then you go practice it, then you put it to the test on game day. And I think just the whole process it felt at home to me. It felt normal because it was relatable to kind of how I grew up. And I think that's really what filled that void. But I had to go through. I got really into golf. Still a pretty decent golfer, but there's a bunch of different things. I tried a bunch of things, and they satisfied me for a little bit, but they didn't quite fill that hole that I needed until I found that. So, but who knows? I mean, going out there to East Tennessee might have put the little plug in my head that I would need 10 years later.
Outdoorsiness,
yeah.
I've mentioned him before on a previous episode, but I'm a big fan of Gary Vaynerchuk, Gary V. And one of his biggest adages and one of his biggest pieces of advice for young people is, what do you enjoy? What is a passion? What do you love? What's a hobby that you think about all the time and you eat, sleep, and breathe it? Find that. Because you're going to devote a lot of energy and time to it because you love it so much. And then ask yourself / find a way, can I make money at this? Can I not to get rich, but can I survive? Can I make a living off of doing this interest, this love, this hobby?
For sure.
And can I turn it into a career?
There's a really good Henry David Thoreau quote that sticks with me and is probably one of the most influential quotes of my life. And I'll butcher it here a little bit, but I'll paraphrase. It's basically, why would one waste the best years of their life making money to enjoy a questionable liberty at the least valuable time of it?
Yep.
Mm-hmm. So basically, why would you spend your 20s, 30s, 40s, even your 50s working your butt off to make money, to save for retirement, which could be argued as the least valuable time of your life because there's opportunities. Physically. I mean, snowboarding, if I couldn't start doing what I'm doing at 60, I probably could, but maybe not,
Yeah. You can still play golf.
I could definitely play golf.
That's true.
Definitely fish. So that's my hedging my bets there.
But you're getting a lot of practice in now. But that's a good quote.
And I go back and forth because I don't really necessarily have a retirement plan. Like, I don't plan to retire.
But what you're doing now, you can foreseeably keep doing. And even if you get stuck with a physical limitation, you can still do something that gets you in that atmosphere, that environment.
Yeah. And that's the thing. I'm not afraid to change it up if I had to. I'm not afraid to move on something else.
Clearly. We've seen this in your story.
Yeah, and I think that's important for other people to realize too. It's like, okay, so you get fired from a job or you have to leave it for whatever reason. That's not where the story ends.
Yeah.
At least for me. Like, I could go get 10 jobs tomorrow if I really wanted to. That's just kind of my mindset.
Right. Well, and a lot of people say a change is scary.
It is.
But it's kind of a perspective thing, because change can be scary if we're only looking at it from one side.
Exactly.
And you see it sounds like, from the opportunity side.
Oh, yeah.
Change can be different and can be scary, but look at all this opportunity. Look, I can go down this path, and it's not a negative, woe is me type vibe.
For sure. Yeah, and I think it's just a simple mindset shift there. Is scary, but look at all the opportunity.
Yes.
And I see opportunity first and foremost, and I'm always willing to go after an opportunity. If it's something that I want, I rarely hold back. I try
and you ask yourself that question, is this what I want?
Exactly. And then if it's not, then I move on to something else. And if it is, then I go in on it. Yeah, that's a good point.
It's a great outlook.
For your gig right now is very untraditional.
Say the least.
Mountainous,
in
adventure.
Fact, I can hear parents saying, "Don't listen to that episode."
Yeah.
But
and that'd be fair. I would not recommend this life for everybody, because obviously the glitz and glamour on Instagram and stuff isn't. That's maybe
we see the video with the soundtrack, man.
Yeah, exactly. The highlight reel.
Yeah, you don't have Miley Cyrus's "The Climb" playing in your head, or maybe you do.
Thank goodness. Your way. No, I hope I don't now. But
there's a lot of work. There's a lot of work.
It's not to discourage anybody from where they want to go. There's a line that comes through your whole story, though, that is applicable to everything. A lot of times we talk about, we mentioned this a little bit before the podcast, before we started, about our agilities and being able to be agile. We talked about this in other podcasts as well. With those skills, all the multiple skills you're talking about, being able to pivot and to do other things. What would you say about that a little bit? Riff on that a little bit, because I think it is an important point in the way career paths look right now. My dad worked for 30 plus years for the same company, great retirement, did his thing. You've said before that, one, that's not happening again. Two, I don't think your generation wants that anymore, right? We've seen that in the pandemic. A lot of folks.
We've seen parents and grandparents just come home from work and be like, "Oh, what a day," or like, "Oh, it was miserable," because they feel like they might be stuck. And that's why this generation, I feel like, is like, I want something better for myself.
I have some friend. My son has told me about friends that graduated from college, great jobs, and about 3-4 years into this job, they realize, I've got a house note or a huge apartment.
Yeah.
I've got a F-150 note, and I bought a boat, and I can't leave my cubicle because I've got all of this stuff that's riding
tied down by stuff.
That's a good point. For me, I've always prioritized flexibility over a lot of things, and that's exactly why I don't have a house. I got a truck that's paid for, and it's getting on up there in the mileage. I have done a really good job of not buying into that whole cookie cutter program and, buying a house and doing all that stuff, because I knew that I wanted to maintain my flexibility, right? I knew that, yes, I want to, settle down, whatever you want to call it, at some point, but I want to settle down on my terms, and I want to settle down where I want to and how I want to. So that means, all right, cool, we'll stay flexible, right? But that's a lot. It's a lot of good things on that side, but there's sacrifices to be had on the other side.
Right, sure.
Right? So, like, I sleep a lot in my truck, and I got a little camper that I pull behind me now, and I sleep in that a lot. And I'm on the road a lot, and I'm eating a lot of, this is not the trainer side of me, but I'm eating a lot of gas station hamburgers and drinking energy drinks and coffee and whatnot. And I'm so active, I don't really have to worry about that. And that's not 100% my diet, but
sure, but
the sacrifices that go into all of that is shouldn't be.
I think the point I want to make on that is you had an understanding of what you said. I wanted to be able to be flexible, and I kind of sound like I'm throwing the guy with the F-150 under the bus with his note and his job. What happens in that is they're looking at it like, this isn't what I really wanted to do.
Sure,
and I get lost with it. I thought I wanted these things, but I don't. Frankly, what you do is not appealing to a lot of folks, and it is to others. But there's something about having something out there, of knowing who I am, knowing what I want to be, and then being able to live a life that supports that, whichever way it might be.
Yeah, and I'm not saying the F-150 and the cubicle thing is wrong. A lot of people
that's
can
what
enjoy that.
I guess that's what I want to talk about.
You're a different personality, whereas some of those people might find genuine joy in stuff. But you sound like you find genuine joy in what you're doing.
That's the point I wanted to ask.
The experience, and not stuff necessarily.
For sure. Yep.
But some people might. Like, people are different. And
100%. That's totally cool. If you
talk
like
about
stuff.
the joy, though, part of it. Like, not the specifics, because I found a lot of joy in, I've had multiple different careers, and I found joy in every one of them.
Sure. Oh, yeah.
And I need to leave every one of them when I did as well.
I can relate.
So not so much about your specific lifestyle, but the thing that fuels it is a little bit different. You see what I'm saying with that?
Yeah, I know where you're going with that.
And that's where I'm not trying to compare this gig with this gig. I'm saying there's some kind of thing deeper that fuels it.
I'm really glad you brought that up, because I hadn't thought about this point until right now. But I've studied a lot of like Stoicism, Stoic philosophy, and stuff like that. And a lot of that and a lot of life is managing suffering, right? Because we all, and this is going to sound pessimistic, so just kind of bear with me here just for a second. It'll come full circle. We choose what we want to suffer for, right? And on the flip side of that, we choose what we want to have pleasure for, right? So in suffering, so take your example. We got the guy with the cubicle with the house and the F-150, and he's suffering because he doesn't have the flexibility as the guy who's living out of his truck does, right? But guy living out of his truck suffering because he doesn't have the stability of the guy in the F-150 and the job. And this guy may not know exactly what his income is going to be. That guy knows, pretty good idea. I was like, all right, cool. If I stay at this job doing the same thing, I'm going to make this much. I can save this much. The guy over here doing the gig work is like, man, I got to find gigs for next month because I didn't work this much this month, So I think that is a huge takeaway. If anything, I would like people to have is choose what you want to suffer for. Choose what the suffering you want to have, right? Because the guy with the family in the house doesn't suffer from loneliness, but suffers from his lack of freedom, maybe. The guy in the truck suffers from his loneliness, but doesn't suffer from his lack of freedom. He can go anywhere and do anything. So both people suffer. I think there's this misconception that people who are successful, who have made it, don't suffer. We all suffer from something. Yeah. And we have the ability to determine what it is we suffer from. Right. So
that's such great advice.
And I think that's something that's really been pivotal to me as well. It's like, all right, cool. I don't know exactly where I want to have a house yet, but I want to pin it down, and I want to take my time and not rush, and kind of explore places, explore areas where I think I might want to have a house. So in the meantime, I'm going to maintain flexibility, but I know I'm going to suffer from not having a house. I may have to rent storage space here and there to store all my gear. I may have to sleep in the truck. I may have to camp a lot, yada, yada, yada. So you just have to know those things and, plan it on a piece of paper if you need to, and just make sure you're willing to do those things. And I think especially high school kids coming out of high school, going into college or career, whereas to ask themselves that question, I think it'd help them out a lot. At least get them thinking, right? You don't have to have the answers. Maybe you do want that job in the cubicle. Maybe you don't. Go for it for a little bit. And then you can always change your mind.
You're not stuck.
No, you're not stuck, especially nowadays. And with the technology and the ability to travel, I wouldn't be able to do a lot, if I grew up, 30, 40 years ago.
Sure.
It's just different. Yep. So, and I think that speaks to people not staying in the jobs as long because there's so many opportunities and the world's a lot smaller.
There's so many new jobs.
Yeah, new
that
jobs.
Weren't around
and
30
you can
40 years
work
ago.
from your home on a computer now for some of these jobs.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of opportunity. And if you're just willing to get out there and kind of, test the waters, I think you could, you can find something that you're looking for. There's a lot less necessity to get stuck, right? If you get stuck nowadays, it's kind of just on you. And there's always ways to kind of get out of that. Like I said previously, people need to take responsibility at some point, take responsibility for their own life. And you can have all the excuses in the world, but at the end of the day, you got to make your own bed and you got to sleep in it.
I think that's huge.
So, and I can come off a little brash and maybe a little rough around the edges, but I think in today's politically correct world, people need to hear, truth and hard truth sometimes. And I've had people speak those truths into me, and it wasn't the best medicine at the time. It tasted horrible.
Yeah.
But
We don't always want to hear what's being told to us.
Yeah, exactly.
But if we take some of that ego away, step back, and our inner voice asks that question again, you got to be truthful with yourself and see, is this, again, going back to your suffering thing, like, is this worth it for me? Is this what I enjoy? Is this what I'm getting fulfillment out of?
For sure. And that brings up another point that's a huge kind of foundational philosophy for me is know thyself. Just simple. Know who you are. If you don't know who you are, that's your job right now.
Yes.
Figure that out. It may take you 5-10 years. You don't have to have the answer right now. But through experiences, through jobs, through talking to people, through life in general, make that your job to figure out who you are and maybe not what you want to be.
Not what people think of you.
No. Yeah, that doesn't matter.
Yeah, no.
Doesn't matter. And I think that's one thing that separates me, among others, is that I really don't care what people think, what people say, because I know who I am, and the people who know me, like you guys, know who I am. Right? It may not come across in a 50-minute conversation like this, but that's why relationships are so important, because it takes time to build and energy to build and effort to build. And then once you have those relationships, those become some of the most valuable things in your entire life. So I think it's important to figure out who you are. And you can help, those people help you figure out who you are.
Sure.
They ask you the right questions.
Oh, you
they
need
give you
that.
the medicine.
Quite frankly, I mean, that whole mirror thing of where I've got some folks, and I can go through a list of them, including my wife, that are holding up a mirror to me sometimes that I need to look at. I think I know myself, but I need those voices. It's not a loner thing. No, you're not talking about that.
No.
It's about being able to see, and you've got to hear that voice from other people.
The honesty,
got to.
Yeah, sometimes you have your own blinders about things. You can't always see.
Sure,
you need an outsider's perspective.
Yep.
That medicine that you didn't like tasting came from somebody that you had built some sort of way to hear them.
Yeah,
you could hear that at some point.
Oh, yeah.
And we all have that. It goes back also to those scripts and stuff that we're given sometimes.
Yeah. And if I may, one little thing to add on to that is another thing that I've, operational boundaries, right? So there's two more philosophies, I should say, that kind of open me up and close me off at the same time. One is I believe that there's nothing really that I can't go out there and do. Nowhere I can't go, nothing I can't do. Okay, cool. That opens up the world to you, right?
Right.
Sure.
So now you got to narrow it down, because you can't go climb every mountain. You can't go fish every river. All right, so now narrow that down. Operational boundaries. What is it that I think I really want to do? And then this is kind of after you found a couple of those passions, right? So for me, I don't have too much of an inkling to go outside of North America to explore, right? There's so many mountains, so many rivers here in the United States and Canada. I wouldn't include Mexico, just U.S. and Canada. And there are so many things to explore. I couldn't explore if I had 10 lifetimes. There's just so much here. So, narrowing down that is, all right, cool. So now I don't have to think about anything else. Maybe Everest, if somebody gave me the opportunity to do Everest. Maybe.
Right.
But financially, that's a little harder to attain.
It's a lot harder to obtain. So I would definitely need some sponsors for that or something.
Shout out at Nick LaToof. No, just kidding.
But yeah, so that that's over there.
Right.
Now I'm narrowing in my focus. Okay, cool. Only North America. Now what it is? Okay, cool. I don't really like the Rockies, right? Bigger mountains, cool objectives. All right, cool. So I won't mess with the East Coast too much. Now I'm knocking them. The East Coast is great. Like I said, I spent time in the.
But if your base camp is Colorado,
it's hard to get out there, right? So these boundaries, right? That's why these boundaries become incredibly important, because you can't bite off everything.
They're more attainable.
And that's not to say that they are attainable, because even I couldn't even climb all the mountains in Colorado realistically in the next 10 to 15 years. Maybe, I don't know. There's a bunch of them out there.
Right.
But okay, all right, so we narrowed it down. We're on the west side of North America. It's like, all right, cool. What are some of the coolest objectives that you want to do? And you start writing them all down, and he's like, all right, cool. I don't know this one's super hard. I may have to build up some more experience before I get to that one.
Right.
And you just chunk it down.
Yeah.
And then you get to the smallest step, the first step. So that's, pulling from both sides again. Yeah, let's focus on this next step that we have to do now. But also, let's look at it from the other side, and it's like, all right, cool. Let's just look at it from way out here, and then just slowly
break down that big goal into.
And those are ways I think we can build those muscles and make huge astronomical
back to those stepping stones
more attainable, because you don't eat the elephant in one bite.
Right.
You get one bite at a time.
That's right.
And you eat thousands of bites, hundreds of thousands of bites. And the same thing goes for any kind of career, any football team,
Pick it.
business.
That's right.
You're trying to build a business. Okay, cool. Maybe you get an LLC first.
Yep.
Figure that out.
Yep.
Okay, maybe you need an office space. Go find that. And you just do obtainable things, 1 to 2 to 3 things a day.
Well,
and you get there.
and let's say you want to be a fashion designer in New York City. Like you want to be a top tier fashion designer. You're probably going to start off selling T-shirts on Etsy that you make in your garage. You
Exactly.
know?
And you can't
that's
be-
not high fashion. You're not jumping right into that big obtainable goal, but you're starting to work your way up into that industry maybe. And,
Exactly.
and you got to start at the bottom.
Yeah, and you can't be too prideful not to want to start there.
Correct.
Even if you are successful in one endeavor and you want to switch it over, right? You have to swallow the pride and be like, I got to start from, I'm a rookie now.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was a CEO over here, but this is a different field. I got to prove myself over here.
Right.
And I think people who are willing to do that, willing to take that step to go over there. Tiger Woods, right?
Yep.
He was on top of the world. I think he just won a couple of majors one year. Decided to completely redo his swing.
Yeah.
This is, at the time, he was the number one golfer in the world, had been for quite some time. And he said, I'm going to take a step back and I'm going to get worse a little bit. So maybe I can get a little bit better.
Yep.
He wasn't okay with where his swing was for whatever reason. And he decided to all right, cool. Let's just start over. I'm going to build a whole new swing. And he did. And I think that's the kind of attitude you have to have. I think you should have confidence. You should believe in yourself, but you should also question why you do that.
Yeah.
You should question,
It would be easier for him to just have kept it.
Yeah.
Right.
And it may have been better off, but he was willing to take the risk to change the swing to get marginally better. I mean, we're talking about the best golfer in the world at the time.
Right.
A great golfer.
But he still saw a way that he could potentially.
There's always room to improve. So if the greatest of the great can break down themselves and say, hey, I guess I'm pretty good, but I need to get better.
Yep.
Then you can get better at wherever you are right now. And that's kind of what I'm always striving to do as well. It's like, all right, cool. This is where I'm kind of, lackluster in. Let's get better. Let's get better.
You're going to get kind of stagnant if you're just content all the time. I mean,
you'll get stagnant, and then you'll get bored, and then you'll
Yep.
probably end up stuck, and you'll be like, oh, well, I need to pivot, or I need to do this, need that. Maybe you just need to work a little harder.
Right.
Maybe you just need to change something. Maybe
the pivot's not the right thing for you, and you just needed to advance yourself in that area to find more joy in it.
Exactly. Yeah, 100%. I think, people just need, and I think if a lot of people just didn't care as much what other people thought or what the community will say about them if they did X, Y, and Z, I think we would have a different world,
You got to be honest with yourself.
And the people, you got to remember too, the people who are talking about you behind their back probably aren't doing anything themselves. They
They're
have
probably jealous. They're probably jealous of you're doing something they're not.
You may be doing something that they didn't have the courage to go off and do themselves. So instead of, trying to go out and do it or teaming up with you and maybe building something even bigger than the both of you, they are staying in those comfort zones and they just want to chit chat. I was told a long time ago, talk is cheap. Everybody can afford to do it.
Right.
So
Yeah.
Right.
Wow.
What would you tell your younger self?
that's a good question.
It's kind of become our official show question.
I love this question, and
It is.
and it's one that I think about for myself is all the time, but I love asking it. And
It's a good question to ask, and I think it's a good question to ask because wherever anybody's listening to this at right now, they may not be listening to this answer. I think they're thinking, which is probably better, in my opinion, for them just to ask themselves, what would they tell themselves? Because it's such a good question. Because hindsight's 20/20. This isn't a question to beat yourself up over failures or anything like that, but more so to help people. There's that quote out there is like, help be the person you needed when you were that age, right? So who was the person that I needed when I was 18 or whatever, 20? And, I think patience goes a long way. And I think I underestimate how patient I am because I don't necessarily think about that. But people tell me, a lot.
Right.
And it does come in handy when I, think about that. I'm like, okay, teaching people how to fish, like new fly fishing. Fly fishing is a little tricky, right?
Yeah.
And there's a little bit of a learning curve. So one has to be patient when teaching those things because there's a lot going on with a fly rod in your hand if you've never held one before. Yeah. So I would say be patient with yourself. You don't have to have it all figured out tomorrow. Yeah. You don't have to have it all figured out next year. Honestly, you never have to have it figured out.
Right.
A lot of people will joke and say, man, you got it figured out, Nick.
I get bored every time I get it all figured out, but go ahead. I mean, that's just...
Yeah, I was like, I'm figuring it out.
We're constantly learning.
It is a in-motion process, figuring it out.
Right.
And I would say just be patient. You're going to figure it out.
Yeah. For the 3 years that I taught high school, I learned more than I feel like I taught. Not to say I was a bad teacher, but like you learn more while doing a teachable moment.
For sure.
And that was perspective, I feel like.
Oh, yeah. Perspective goes a long ways. And if you can have control over the perspectives that you tell yourself, the stories that you tell yourself, you're gonna be ahead. Because a lot of people don't change those stories. They're not their own narrator, right? They let other people narrate their lives.
Right.
You're going to need that patience when you're self-evaluating yourself.
Yeah. Patience and not to take things so personal either, like be hard on yourself. There's a good quote. It's like, it says something like you should be patient with others, but hard on yourself. So, be patient with others. Let them, don't be so hard on others. Don't have high expectations for others necessarily, but have high expectations for yourself. That's only going to make you better, and that's going to help with your patience level with others. Because one thing, when I was younger, I was really passionate about a lot of things, and I could see people who wanted to get out of the small hometown and wanted to do something bigger and better. And I was in the process of moving out, and I was like, it'll be so much fun if I got like 2 or 3 buddies to do this with. Yep. And I spent probably the last month or so there, like, trying to convince these guys, like, dude, we can go do this together. We can go and just see what happens and make it happen. And it'll be easier if it'll be, a couple of us, I think. But couldn't convince anybody else to do it. And I was like, well, I'm going to do it. I don't care. And I think that's another thing, too. Don't be afraid to do things by yourself. I've done a lot of things by myself that I wish I would have had a better, a buddy with me or something. And, I'd have probably advanced quicker if I did. But at the same time, if I didn't go by myself, I wouldn't be here right now, too.
Right.
I mean, there's that old adage that's, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go with other people.
Right.
And I don't know necessarily if that's true, because sometimes you have to start by yourself.
Yep.
And then those other people don't come on till further down the road. But if you would have never started by yourself, you would have never met those people.
Yep.
So I take that with a grain of salt, and I say, if you think you should do something, you should just go ahead and do it and figure it out along the way. And I think just by doing that, I think you'll be rewarded with the right people coming in at the right time if you're open to it.
We'll get riffing on a whole other thing. Is who are the right people, man?
Yeah, that's another thing.
I mean, knowing who to hear and who not to hear.
Yeah,
that's the thing. So
I think you should approach that with skepticism, as everything, right? Like, okay, I think this guy's telling me what I want to hear. I think he's telling me some good stuff, but why? What's in it for him? And I think a lot of people will be genuinely surprised about the good nature of people. We hear a lot about the bad people on the news and stuff, and I think, overwhelmingly, there's more good people out there than bad.
That is absolutely true.
Yep.
That's something I've found in my life over and over and over again. Where all my travels, that's the thing I remember the most. The scenery and all that's great, but I can go through a list of
It's easier to
people.
point out a flaw than to celebrate a victory.
For sure.
Usually we're pointing out flaws so we can make ourselves feel better.
Correct.
And I think when we see the good we live by it. Something in the past year or 2 or 3 that I've been learning is so much of the way we interact with other people is based on some label we've placed on them. We place a label on somebody so that we can quick hit, I know who that is. Obviously, that's not true. And as I move away from the labels, about the only label I like is human being.
Yep.
And when I approach somebody like that, all of a sudden I see much more. There's so much more good.
There's no need to always categorize everything.
Right. Man, we could go start riffing again. We probably need to wrap it up. You got anything you want to talk to us about before we go?
Well, you brought up something earlier. I feel like the listeners may chastise you guys if I don't elaborate on it, but the whole dirtbag term.
I did.
Yes.
I'm glad you did that.
Circle
I
back.
want to hear about it.
So I don't necessarily see it as derogatory. If you are out west or you follow any van life stuff on Instagram or stuff, you might see the
Very
term
popular.
dirtbag.
Yep.
And it was derogatory in nature originally when it came out. Basically, it's speaking to people who don't conform to the typical 9 to 5. They don't necessarily work a normal job, but
Almost nomadic, right?
very nomadic. Yep. And it came out through like the rock climbing kind of community.
Right.
I feel like with like Alex Honnold, that group. and all the people in Yosemite back in 60s and 70s, I think. But basically, it is a person who chooses to not have a typical life, typical 9 to 5, to pursue a passion, such as rock climbing, and like ski bums are in it now.
Fill in the blank. Yep.
Trout bum, whatever it is, the case is now.
Surfers.
So
you see it a lot with surfing. Yeah.
Oh, surfing for sure. Surfing may be
fan
even,
culture and surfing.
Yeah, surfing may even be even bigger, to be honest with you. But and I have a lot of respect for these people because they have chosen what they want to suffer for. A, not making a ton of money.
Yep.
Living in their vehicles sometimes. And pursuit of something that they are, deathly passionate about, whether it be surfing, fishing, whatever. And so, you got to hats off to these people. Maybe most people don't maybe not understand them. There's some weirdos in there, but there's some weirdos that work 9 to 5 too. So
that's true.
There's different people in different categories there. So, but yeah, they're nomads. They tend to travel. They follow the good waves. They follow, where's the good weather for rock climbing?
Where's the snow coming in? Yep.
Exactly. So, it's all goes back to the choose what you want to suffer for, right? And these people have passions.
It's worth it for them.
Yeah, that they're willing to sacrifice just about everything else, sacrifice relationships, whatever the case is, so they can pursue these things. And there's been some great, quote unquote dirtbags out there that have paved the way for people like me who are exploring the mountains. There's a good movie, if anybody wants to dive into this further, called Dirtbag.
Oh, okay.
It's the story of Fred Beckey. And Fred Beckey is responsible for so many first ascents on all these North American peaks, and even some over in Asia, I believe. So that's a really good film. People should check out. It's good. It talks about his life and what all he did and the commitment he had to his craft. And I think everybody could pick up something from that, because no matter if you want to be a dirtbag or you want to be a Fortune 500 CEO, there's principles and things that you got to have in place for that success.
Have to add this one to our mental dictionary, Mike. Dirtbag.
Well, if you ever have a question, you can just...
We can ask our favorite dirtbag.
Professional day.
Wow.
Man, thanks for being here. It's always good to see you. It's good to have you in town.
It's been one of the most insightful episodes I feel like we've had. I've learned a lot from this, and obviously I love being in your presence and getting to chat with you, but I'm glad you're able to bring this to our audience. So thank you so much for being here.
No, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure. Always good to sit down with you guys, and I'd be happy to come back if you ever guys...
Would love to have you.
Awesome.
It's always good to have you in town.
Yep. On behalf of Mike Young, I am Michael Holliday, and this has been this episode of Two Mics and a Guest.